And I know that's a lot at once, but of course we're going to be going through that together as we create. Okay, so hopefully these are dry enough. And I always, oh, here we go, on my brush. So let's do our light green now. If you find your yellow is still wet, I feel like most of them are dry. There might be a few that are a little bit lighter. I'm just going to use a little paper towel, like kind of lift out some of the water that's in it. And normally, like if I had more time, I would just let it dry, and that's fine. But because, you know, we're in a class, I can't wait for it to dry the whole way. Okay, so load your brush up with your light green. You want to create a stem. Remember, kind of curved. And I'm just going to lift some of that green out of the yellow for the ones that are still wet. Okay, so let's create some petals, or sorry, leaves. There's going to be overlapping. It's going to be very tight in there. So I did this layering, right? So I did this one basically full down. I had a few leaves coming off this one. The rest are implied that they're hiding because you can't see them. And to kind of make it so there's some contrast, grab some light or darker green on your brush. And this back flower, I'm going to add a little bit of that dark green to the stem, just so that it looks like it's receding, so it's from behind, and maybe add a few little leaves hiding behind there to give it some depth. That's what I mean by when I'm adding in some dark, just to create depth in your painting. If it's all one shade, it will look more flat. The thing to look out for this is just make sure that you do have some white spaces throughout that look like, you know, that gives definition between your leaves. So if they're all touching and there's like no white space in here, it will just turn into a green block, right? But by keeping, you know, open spaces, that will help to find it. And I find that for beginners, that's usually what happens. It's like the hardest part is to not add too much and just be aware of your white space. So I'm just letting you know now as we're working through this to be aware of that. More white space, the better as you're learning, because you can always go back in and add more greenery to fill some of it if you need to. Okay, so here's a stem right here, and doing like 3 at a time, I feel like is doable, right? Okay, so this, do I want that one to go that low? So this is where I'm saying maybe I'll add like another pink flower here, because maybe I don't know if I want this to go like that far down. So I'm going to leave this white space here so I can add maybe another like pink or yellow flower right there. So using your light green. So depending on like what direction I'm working, I do both. I work in to out or out to in. Do what's comfortable for you. What's comfortable for your hand. Like normally if I'm going up against something like this and there's a white space, I work from out to in. So I know like where I'm going to end. Like I know that I won't overlap into the other area if I don't want to. If there's more of an open space, I can work from in to out. It just kind of, it varies. So there's no set way. It's just whatever is comfortable really for you. But you probably, as you're working, will alternate between the two. And what I mean by that, if you're not understanding, is that when you create your stem, right, you're working towards your stem. So your leaves, you'll either work from out to in towards the stem, or you'll start at the stem and work your way out. So that's what I mean by that. Okay, grabbing a little deep green. Just gonna add some kind of back layering. Could put some at the top. You want your leaves kind of to float, like maybe even like behind, right? And like into the gaps a little bit. Okay, my green is dry. So I'm actually, while I'm here, I'm just gonna clean my brush off and go in and add a flower there so I don't forget. So I'm gonna add, I'm gonna mix, what do I want to put there? I'm gonna do a little bit of pink mixed with my deep yellow. And I'm just gonna add the flower right there. Okay. There we go. If you didn't need to do that, then, you know, you're fine. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my light yellow. I mean, sorry, light green. And sense. Okay. Like that. Load your brush up if you need to. Some of the stems will get like almost no leaves because they'll be essentially hidden behind, so you really won't see as much. So I'm gonna go in with some deep green and like use that on like the ones that are hidden more, like receding, I should say. And then you can use that deep green and add in some of the gap areas. If you wanted to, you could also add it to like a front leaf like this, or a front stem like that. That'll give it a little contrast. So even right now, I notice like, I think I need something darker here. So I'm gonna add a little bit of depth like behind there. And then use my water to soften it like that. Okay. And I didn't go all the way down because I'm deciding yet like if I want to add another flower or not. But if you find like your space maybe isn't as wide as mine, then you don't need to do that. You can actually just go ahead and fill it. So it's like to your discretion. We can always go in and add more blue too, like more blue flowers. Okay, adding some green, light green, then going in with my dark green, kind of overlaying a little bit, putting some gaps. I want actually more depth at the bottom, so I'm going to add dark green towards the bottom here. Get like a little close. So I have this gap. I'm going to add a little bit of something right here, like my kind of orangey color that I made. Yellow orange. Okay, and then I'm going to let that dry. Well, let me put in its contrast color. So I'm going to put some pink like that. And I'm going to let it dry, and I'll come back to and fill like the space around here. So I actually know I probably want to add another blue here. So I'm going to go back to my blue. I'm going to use that white blue mixture and add another one here. And I think while I'm at it, I'm just going to layer a couple at the top here. So notice how this is kind of, it's just like you're building on it, right? It's not like one set and done, like that's it. You really are building on it as you're creating it. And I think that's really important to see and learn, like as a painter, because I feel like sometimes people can get the impression that like you have it all figured out from the beginning. You just kind of know what direction you're going in, especially sometimes it can be misleading when you see time lapses done and people are just like speeding through something. So I think that this is a good lesson in that like you're kind of fixing and adding as you're going. I'm going to add my little yellows towards the bottom because that's a little wet. I'm going to just kind of skip over that part and come to the edge here and add some greenery. Add some bigger leaves at the bottom of this one. And I want to create depth in here. So I'm going to go in with my darker green and overlayer a little bit. And towards the base, especially, right? And I'm going to pull like a line of green down like that and add it. And it might be like, well, where's that coming from? Well, you have all these flowers up here, so there has to be a stem somewhere poking through. Using that darker green, I'm also adding a little bit up here. Fill in this middle area. Let's load up our green, light green, and keep in mind, this is a student brand paint, so it's not going to be like the highest quality paint, so the pigmentation of it won't be as smooth like if you don't mix it enough. It's a good paint as far as like when you're learning, but you will have to kind of like baby it a little bit more, like if you're wanting it to not dry out and be speckly. So just add more water, mix it more, and it should avoid any of that. Okay, so light green. Make our stems. Okay. Adding some leaves. Just go back and fill your brush up. Usually between at least every stem you create. Sometimes I do it twice. I load up twice with one stem, just depending on like how big the leaves are, because our brush is rather small, so it can only carry so much paint. Okay, so I'm going to create a line down here, and then I'm going to go, so you notice how it's like really light right now? I need a little more contrast. So that's why I'm going to go in with my darker green, kind of add a little bit of contrast, like towards the base, create a few leaves that are like looking like they're receding, so like popping behind, maybe create a little bit of line on the stem here, just for a little depth. Having a layering of these two colors will really just bring your painting more to life. Okay, is this section dry? So like down here, I want to add a little bit more greenery. So I'm using my dark green just to kind of fill the space a little bit. But again, leaving white space so that it's not like a block of color. Okay, let's see, maybe down here. So just kind of look at it as a whole, like, okay, where do I need more green? Like, where is it balanced, you know? And you'll keep in mind also that things will appear darker when they're wet, you know, and then they will dry and they'll appear lighter. And so you might think something is like pretty dark, and then when it dries, it will become lighter. So again, that's something that you kind of pick up on and learn about, you know, how much paint to water ratio you need to create some depth. And yeah, you learn that as you keep painting, and you'll know. It is like, I think one of the hardest parts of painting with watercolor is the ratio of water to paint. It's most challenging for sure. And it's not something you just pick up like, you know, day one. It definitely takes some practice. So if that's something that's like irritating you, just know that that's normal. Okay, so I'm going to come up to these guys I'm using the deeper green still. Remember how I said like I kind of wanted to create a few that were maybe out of the line? like a little higher up, so it didn't look like it was a straight line. So I'm going to clean my brush out, go back to my white and blue mixture, and add one that's like up here and like one that's a little bit farther down. That way, like it's a little bit like rogue, like it went rogue. Maybe like one right here too. Okay, and I'm gonna wait for that to dry a minute, then add my yellow and then my green. So while that's drying, let's start on our sweet peas on the very left side here. Okay, so I want the highest point of this one to probably be about here-ish. I think I want to go up the line like this. Yeah, so think about here. So I'm going to kind of start the stem here and work my way, because I need to have space to work my way up a little bit. And it's going to be like not so drastic. It's going to be less steep. So give or take like about right here. So grab some of your light green. We're going to create our stem. Right there, it's good. I like to do 3 stems at a time at least, so I know like placement, and that way like I can fill accordingly or create like the petals a certain size. And create, remember, curves like that. Okay. Actually, while we're at it, why don't we just do the stems like another stem, just so that we have a little bit more direction. And I love like kind of prepping, creating our like skeleton, I like to call it. And I'm going to create a little one off of that to go up. So notice how we're going up a little bit, right? Okay, so because that's drying, let's actually go in and add that yellow. That way, when I come back, I can add green and we can keep the ball rolling. So add your little yellow mark at the bottom of the. Okay, so while that's drying, let's start our sweet peas. So we're going to use our purple, white mixture, and our pink. So let's get started. So we mixed our purple with our white, remember? And we start light, create our outline. So we'll start at the top. And if you find yourself like not being able to do 3 at a time, just go in and fill it right after you create it. Okay? I know that's so light. So let me add a little more color so you can see it better. I'm going to hug it over here. Remember, just texture is our friend. So just kind of go up and down with your brush, create some texture, and then it kind of tapers off as you get closer to the stem there. So it gets thinner. That way it doesn't look bulky. It has like that whimsical feeling, and less bulk as you get towards the center. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with a little pink and add it kind of towards the base or towards like the sides of some. You don't want them to all be the same. So I'm adding my pink at different places. So for this top one, I'm working it off to the right here. And then for this one, I'm going to add it towards like more towards the base. Kind of pull the color up a little. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, so remember here, you take your dark green or deep green, like less watered down, basically straight from that like blob of paint. So it's like really not basically not like watered down because this is so wet. And we're gonna just create like a little dot placed towards the tip or the base of every little petal. And that will like slowly be bleeding. And if you want to like move it around, you can yourself with that. Okay, so clean out that green and let's go back to our purple. Creating a top. And yours don't have to be exactly like layered like mine, like I was telling you. You can really simplify it and create like 3 and kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like down the line. Like if you find the layering is a little bit difficult right now, you can like keep it simple like that. And what you could do is actually take a little bit more purple, mix it with a little pink if you want to create like a mauve almost. That could be like your contrast, add it to like the base a little bit. Really the point of adding in more color is to just create some depth in your flower. Okay. And you can move that color around a little bit. Since I have that purple still in my brush, I'm just going to use it for my next flower. Yeah, beautiful. And then kind of fill your brush back up as you need it. Some of my petals are going to turn more pink. I'm going to add more pink to them. So I'm starting more pink than purple. Again, it's a variation that is so beautiful. So say I want like a petal like receding or looking like it's behind. I'm just going to take some purple and add it to behind, leaving a little bit of a white space in between. And that like helps differentiate these 2 layers. Even though some of it bled into that, it's okay because it's a wet on wet. But having this little white line right here really helps define that petal more. And it could be even more defined if they were like not touching. Okay. So for example, for example, if I wanted this pink to like be layered behind here, I create the outline here and I get really close, but I don't touch. And notice like the gap there, but it looks like it's receding. Okay. And if you wanted to even is wait till this one was dry and then you could add in this layer and we can actually go in and grab a little bit of the darker purple and we're going to pull it into that gap almost. And that like helps it push it back a little bit. And I'll do that with this one too. I'll add that into there. So that helps it push it back too. Okay. So going back to my purple, or you can go to your purple pink. Let's create another layer here. I'm creating a few small ones this time. And then using my like darker kind of purple. So what I did was I took violet and mixed it in with some of that white and pink, or white and purple, but just so I just made it a little deeper by adding a little bit more of that violet to it. Okay. Now what you want to do before you go further is grab some of that deep green. Remember, less watered down, stick it at the base of the petal, kind of let it bleed into it a little softer. Okay, we'll do it for these ones. like that. I notice if you wait like a little bit, it kind of helps it from spreading as far if you don't want it to as well, but it's still wet so that it actually moves. Okay, going back to my purples and pinks. And notice how like crazy that one looks, right? But it's like, if you've seen like sweet peas, they kind of like look like tissue paper, right? So there's like so many bends in them. And they're so like transparent. So that's why I really like the lights with the darks, but they're not super dark. It's like, yeah, almost it's like tissue paper. And it keeps it really whimsical. So this is like the pink purple mixture. It's like a mauve. I love that. So we have to go back and create more lines, right? So let's see, so these are dry for me, these blues. So while we have this light green, let's create these lines first with some leaves to kind of fill our space a little bit, right? If yours are still wet, then you can wait for it to dry, but it should be dry because it's been a minute. Go into some of my dark green. So you probably get the hang of like, okay, we're switching between lights and darks, right? Yeah, that was, okay. This green is too dark. So notice how it stands out from everything. I'll just take a piece of paper towel, lift it out. If that happens to you, that's what you can do. Like lift it out a little bit. That way you don't want your eye, again, just going directly if that spot is just so much darker than the rest. So lift it out. So it kind of blends in with the other ones. Going back to my light green, let's see. I want to create a stem like this. And then I'm going to create like a little bit like a stem coming off of it like that. And then my last one is going to be just one like that. Okay. Maybe I'll put a little bit of a line here too. Very light. Maybe I should add a little bit more. Okay. Hopefully this is like, has some kind of relaxing factor for you. That was from Watercolor. It is kind of meditative. And, you know, it's, even though there's a challenge to it, there's something just very relaxing about adding, you know, color to paper and mixing like the water. I don't know. It's just, maybe that comes with time and maybe it's not, maybe you're not there yet, and that's fine. Oh, good, Kathy. Yeah, because I do feel like repeating things, it's not only helping your practice, but it makes you not like, it takes a little stress out of it, in my opinion, because you're just continuously doing the same thing over and over again. So I'm very glad to hear that. So I would say again, the major thing to consider with these sweet peas is using lights, right? So more water, use your whites, but you go in with some contrasting color and really, again, kind of as you get to the stem, make it thinner. So it's like not so bulky, just keep it whimsical. So it tapers off to at the stem. and creating that texture in your petals. And you do that by, creating your outlines. And it's just really like, okay, free flowing. It's like more bulbous, I would say, at the top to create that round factor. And then again, just thinning out as you come towards the stem. So it's I think it's pretty forgiving. Okay, I mixed a little bit of that pink and purple, so we have a little depth here, but I'm gonna pull it around. That way it doesn't dry too dark. One of my tricks I do is that, okay, so like for example, this got too wet, so I'm just gonna pop out some of that color. Sometimes when I get overwhelmed and it just looks like a blob of color, I literally just lift it out. And then like, it's like kind of like cool here because this looks like one petal itself because it's so much lighter. And this is one that's darker, so it's hugging. These two ended up kind of hugging. So lift the color out if you're like, this looks like a blob, and try it again. But one of the tricks that I do is if say like I do add too much color to something. So for example, like, okay, this, actually that's not enough. So like I do something like this where it's like too dark for me. What I do is I just kind of rinse my brush off in the water, and then I go ahead, I absorb some of that color into my brush and I layer it into something else. So like, for example, maybe I'll just come over here and add it to this one over here. You just absorb it. That way you don't waste paint, but also like you need that color. So it's kind of just transferring it. So that's a good tip that that I've learned over time. So that you don't necessarily have to lift all the color out all the time. You can just transfer it somewhere else. Like right here is a little light, so I'm going to add a little more depth by adding a little bit more purple around it, like that. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to look in to see if I find any like gaps or things that like, yeah, like I need more color. And just add a little bit of that green before I forget, the dark green, into these petal bases. Let's see if there's any place I like to fill. So I feel like maybe right here, I'm going to add a leaf or two. Just like I said, I don't want to fill all the white space, but I want to fill places that look gappy to me. So for example, like this stem is just hanging out, right? I'm just going to add like some greenery over it so it doesn't look like it's just floating. I'm going to add a little greenery kind of over here. So if you're seeing any spaces on your piece that look like super like open, keep that in mind that you can go back and just add a little greenery. So I want to add a little, so what I noticed is maybe it's the camera. It might be because it like washes some stuff out a little bit, but if you find like say your blue is a little light after it dries, go in and add a little bit to your brush with water and go over maybe some of the places that you need to add a little bit more depth if you want. Okay, so here we have our painting, you guys. I know that you might be at a different speed. Again, this is why I recorded it, and you can kind of go at your own pace, but hopefully you, like Kathy was saying, you've done the motion like many times, so you're kind of getting the hang of it a little bit. But also feel free to keep practicing on your practice sheets, because I'm sure that you probably didn't use those all up. But if you did, just, you can get some cold pressed paper and keep practicing. And the great thing about it is that you can, practice the same composition over and over again if you want, until you get to a place where you really love it. One other thing you could add, like I was saying in the beginning, is those little eyebrow shapes. Load your brush with some kind of deep green, and underneath these like tulip shapes, like towards the head of some of them, I just create like little eyebrows or little arches to kind of hug the bloom on the bottom. And I don't do it for everyone. I do it just for some of them throughout, because what I find that it kind of helps create a little definition, because it's a little bit of a darker color. It's a more defined mark. Thank you guys for being here. See each other soon. Goodbye.